Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Two million years ago, on a balmy summer morning around 9 a.m., primitive man took a break from scratching his chest. So now let's see, I've taken my morning constitutional, I've gathered enough nuts and berries and bones for today's food. Jane and I did our bit to propagate the species. Now I've spent the last 15 minutes scratching myself, and I've only been up for an hour. What else is there? What's the meaning of life? If I don't come up with some kind of theory, it's going to be just another night with the guys watching the stars with nothing to say but Hearn. But the question was too vast and swampy. It swallowed the man in a psychedelic swirl. Also, some of the berries he'd eaten were mildly poisonous. And the question of meaning drove him insane until the stars came out and he said to his friends, "Ride the snake to the ancient lake." And they all shook their heads and said, Hearn. That man had opened the door to an avalanche closet. I don't know if any of you here have an avalanche closet in your house. We do. Our house has many doors that open into different rooms, but there's one that you open it and a biblical flood of stuff comes rolling out, engulfing the entire hall in a primeval swamp of outgrown baby clothes, lonely shoes, and slithering strands of Christmas lights. And unfortunately, the door is right next to the bathroom door, always waiting to swamp some confused house guest. Once the door is open, there is no closing it without a snow shovel. Really, we should call it Pandora. Get it? What's the meaning of life? It was an avalanche closet. Don't turn the knob unless you're ready for a swim in the murky mix of what we would call religion, politics, and economics. Any one of them a daunting topic alone, but for millions of years they mingled together in a swampy jambalaya called culture. About 10,000 years ago, some tribe came up with an experiment. They decided to remodel nature's house. An immense and terrifying task that we've not yet finished, because it turns out Mother Nature never throws anything away. She just stews in it. But turning this swamp shack into a shopping mall seemed like a good idea at the time, and one thing that had to be dealt with was the avalanche closet, the meaning of life. And these early people eventually did what my wife and I will someday do with our avalanche closet. They set up dividers, a handy shelf system, and they divided meaning into science, religion, and politics, so that they could be dealt with one at a time. They still shared the same closet, but they were more manageable that way, and religion was on the top shelf. About 200 years ago, certain thinkers were digging around in those shelves of science, economics, and gender studies, and every so often they would say, "Aha!" and they would jump up and they would slam the top of their head on that bulky upper shelf called religion. And they began to ask, why does this big shelf need to be on top, slamming me in the head every time I come up with a new idea? Religion has been lording it like a king for too long. It was time that science and politics declared their independence. Certain thinkers began to feel that religion was getting in the way of the quest for the meaning of life. Religion was even getting in the way of the search to understand God. This time, this event is known to us as the Great Enlightenment. Had the Enlightenment thinkers attempted to assassinate God, religion would have had the high ground. Easy to mobilize the impoverished faithful against an attempted siege. But the intellectuals were hatching a plan to break God out of the great stone cathedrals by tunneling under the scriptural foundations of the church to rescue God from religion. This put the religious leaders on the low ground. And so they hatched a plan to regain the high ground by girding their loins, grabbing shovels, and digging for proof. Archaeology burst onto the scene in the 19th century, but it was not only tomb raiders looking for King Tut's gold. It was also true believers digging for evidence to prove the Bible as fact. As Sir James Fraser observed, the field of geology was invaded by an army of theologians. The results were, of course, disappointing. The tree of knowledge, Noah's ark, and the cross that Jesus died of were all made of wood, which generally doesn't last for thousands of years. Jerusalem had been destroyed twice, and the Ark of the Covenant was not found until the first Indiana Jones movie. Besides which, any actual relics or remains in Israel had long since been looted and sold on the Lucky Charm collector's market to become idols and amulets. Martin Luther once said, on a trip to the Vatican, he saw enough nails from the true cross to shoe every horse in Europe. What the pious archaeologists turned up instead were bones. Not the bones of Adam and Abraham, but the fossilized remains of giant monsters. These they called dinosaurs, meaning terrible lizards, because seriously, anything that big had to be a jerk. And the most dangerous of them was called Tyrannosaurus rex, which means tyrant lizard king, on the assumption that he must have legislated unjust tax laws and partied like Jim Morrison. I wish we had a Tyrannosaurus rex with us today so he could say, what? I kill, I eat. It's not like anybody listens to my political opinions. Why do you have to call me Tyrant King? Why can't you call me something cool like Hunt-O-Matic or the Terminator? I'm not even technically a lizard. But now I'm glad we don't have the Tyrannosaurus rex with us today, because we would never get him to shut up, and we have got to stay focused. The biggest problem with discovering the dinosaurs is that they were found to be much older than humanity and, gasp, older than the earth itself. Since Bible scholars had long since established the first day of creation, October 23rd, 4,004 years before the Common Era. And yet here were these bones, millions of years old. There was a simple explanation for this. God had fabricated the bones in order to test humanity's faith. And most people since then have failed that test, myself included. Religion's fleeting honeymoon with archaeology ended in a very sober annulment. And the clerics became fond of quoting Ecclesiastes 1:18, in much wisdom is much vexation, and those who increase knowledge increase sorrow. So the borrowed shovels were returned to the nerds, who have gone on digging for evidence of God's works, regardless of how they might contradict God's word. Of course, some true believers are still digging for the proof of the Bible as fact. This is called pseudo-archaeology. Pseudo meaning spurious, fallacious, fake, for entertainment purposes only. And in a supreme irony that must surely give God a smirk, pseudo-archaeology sells about 1,000 times more books than real archaeology. When we first moved here, one of Elizabeth's medical co-workers asked me what I was going to do for work. Fresh out of seminary, I said I was going to be an itinerant Bible teacher like Jesus was. To which this doctor responded, and then what are you going to do for work? Because doctors know that these days a doctor's husband can't stay at home darning socks anymore. So I said, well, my degree in Bible study also certifies me to teach biology in public schools. And that doctor never spoke to me again. Either because they didn't get the joke, or more likely because they did. The dinosaur debacle turned out to be a minor embarrassment compared with the Darwinian disaster, the 1859 publication of On the Origin of Species, which brought the conflict to a whole new level. It was fine to say that the first human beings were molded from dirt, But the idea of humans originating as bacteria was just too undignified. Religion would have been happy to play the old game of Inquisition, which in this case would have been called guerrilla warfare. But the separation of church and state had become a divorce. Yes, a fairly amicable divorce, but one of the terms was that if the church publicly murdered another scientist, she might as well use her one phone call on God because the state would not bail her out again. The scariest thing about evolution is that it's not over yet. Having once been monkeys is a scary thought, but many of us have recovered from the shock. Actually, it kind of explains a lot. Far more terrifying is that not every species continues to evolve. Some are eliminated by natural selection. Surely God loved the dinosaurs and the dodo bird, but God did not break the law of natural selection for them, and God might not break the law of natural selection for us. According to Darwin's theories, if we refuse to evolve, we could become extinct, which would be doubly embarrassing for us. Because we as human beings, we don't only evolve physically, we also evolve intellectually and technologically. We've got all sorts of ways to adapt to new circumstances. The question is, will we? And will we adapt in a way that works? Because adaptation, particularly our technological adaptations, have not always been geared toward long-term survival. Exhibit A, the spork. After the discovery of dinosaur bones and Darwinian theories in the 19th century, peering into the shadowy past lost some of its appeal. Let's remember that people were just coming out of the Dark Ages, rubbing their eyes, adjusting to the Enlightenment, and far more interested in the bright future, which you could see at all hours because of the electric light. So instead of cowering in the dark after nightfall, people could light their homes all the time. Of course, the cost was that you could no longer see sunlight during the day because of all of the black smoke produced by the Industrial Revolution. And while the clerics never tired of arguing that Adam and Eve were not apes, the captains of industry took the wheel and decided evolution was just fine. When we look at the telegraph, then the telephone, then the television, and then the telescreen, which we've been fooled into calling the internet, what else could it be but evolution? Natural selection. What the majority of consumers select starts to seem natural. And then it becomes a fossil when something smaller and faster comes along. Carriages evolved into cars. Fires evolved into fluorescent lights. Piano-playing daughters evolved into vinyl records. And nerds evolved into billionaires. This oversimplification leaves out the true engine of technological evolution, the military-industrial complex. Always looking for a bigger bang, a quicker, cleaner kill, a better bloodbath, a maximum massacre. Consumers get great toys, computers, hair dryers, remote-controlled cars, whatever, but these are always hand-me-downs from Big Brother, who gets the bigger, better toys, and with guns on them. We get fireworks on the 4th of July, but the big boys learn how to split the atom for the ultimate weapon of mass extortion. For a while in the 1990s, it was cool to talk about the environment, saving the environment so our bodies could still live there. But that fad got old. And in the 21st century, it's become more fashionable to abandon our bodies, evacuate the atmosphere, and go live in the datasphere. When I grow up, I'm going to be a Facebook page. Of course, the datasphere is full of pollution too, but at least you don't have to smell it. And so your biological body becomes something to take photographs of. Splash them on the internet so you can wake up in the middle of the night wondering who you are. Quick, do a Google search for your name. I'm a celebrity. Oh, that's right. I'm also my own private paparazzi. Better take a picture. Long ago, standing in this very spot, I said that my house has an avalanche closet. Now I realize that there are two. One literal avalanche closet in a hallway, and another avalanche closet in my head, which I just opened up and dumped this mess on the floor, and how embarrassing. What we've been looking at here. Digging up dinosaur bones, questioning human origins, developing weapons. We could boil this down to ability and responsibility. What you can do and what you must do. The ability to probe the mysteries of creation, regardless of what our sacred stories say. Just because we can do it doesn't mean that we must. This argument continues to this day, and I do not claim the authority to end it. We are human beings. Our potential is incredible. William Shakespeare wrote, "What a piece of work is man, how noble in reason, how infinite in faculties, in form and movement, how express and admirable. In action, how like an angel. In apprehension, how like a god. The beauty of this world, the paragon of animals." We are all of these things. We can explore the past. We can exploit or digitally escape the present. We can explode the future. But because we can, does that mean that we must? If we pride ourselves on being the culmination of history, is it our responsibility to defend that claim by ending history? We human beings are famous in the animal world for our can-do attitude. Unfortunately, we're famous the way that Billy the Kid and Joseph Stalin are famous. Still, it's good to be famous. No other animal does can-do like we do. But no other animal has such a hard time distinguishing can-do from must-do. Our cultural can-do attitude has led to incredible achievements and incredible danger. Disappearing into the virtual world, leaving our bodies to bloat and rot in front of digital screens, that is something that we can do. Splitting atoms, blooming flowers of destruction that can be seen from outer space, that is something that we can do. The primitive man and woman from 1,000,000 years ago could witness either of these bright, colorful spectacles and be amazed at what humanity can do. Their biggest goal was just to keep the species alive for another generation. And they succeeded. We know it, because here we are. I say, let's see if we can do what they did. Keep this species alive for another generation. And anything that we can accomplish on top of that, we'll call that progress. Let's show that primitive man and woman what humanity can do.